Hi, I'm Jill Gostin, the IEEE Region 3 Director. I hope you find these volunteer resources useful and informative. This is one of several modules which provide training and informational resources for individuals serving in volunteer roles at the IEEE region, section, and chapter level. In 2020, our annual Region 3 conference had to be canceled due to COVID-19. Because of that, we quickly decided to go virtual. We held WebEx meetings to provide the training and information that was to be given to volunteers at the conference, and we recorded those sessions. These recorded modules created the foundation for our IEEE Region 3 Volunteers YouTube channel. The value of these recorded modules has become very evident, so we will continue to build on what is offered here. If you have suggestions for additional content, please leave a request in the comments below.
And John, I turn it over to you just to let everyone know I'm keeping everyone muted until we get to a point where John wants to open up for audio questions. If you have a question during the presentation, I will monitor the chat and try and, or there's a Q&A box down at the bottom. I will monitor both the chat and the Q&A, and I'll pause John if necessary. So go ahead, John.
Okay, Bill, thank you. Welcome, everybody. Thank you for taking some time tonight to listen in on what I want to talk about. I actually have two presentations. The first one is kind of an introduction to section finances, and then the second one will be more on reporting and compliance reporting and financial reporting via NetSuite. Bill had mentioned about questions. I certainly don't mind if somebody wants to ask a question while we're in the middle of the presentation. As Bill mentioned, just use the system and raise your virtual hand, so to speak. I've seen most of the participants listed, and I think I've dealt with many of you in my role as treasurer so far since last May when I took over from Ken Pigg. I also see Dave Green in the audience, who's my mentor, my financial mentor. So Dave, if I say something that doesn't sound quite right, please don't hesitate to chime in. So again, welcome everybody. Hope everybody's well and can stay that way. Just a little bit on the agenda. So we'll obviously talk about some of the fundamentals of section finance, but I do offer some guidance and some advice and some resources that IEEE has. I've got some links for those, and I think I can actually pull them up and give you some examples of some areas that if you're interested in some additional information, IEEE does have a treasure trove of training materials for various different roles, within operating units. And we'll talk a little bit about the end of year reporting and the audit that we just actually went through for 2019. So just a little bit about myself. I haven't been involved too much in the region level until last year. I'm an IEEE Senior Life member. I am the Region 3 Treasurer and the Finance Committee Chair, and a member of the various different committees as called for by the Operations Manual. I'm currently a MOVE volunteer, and in the past, for 2 years, I was the Atlanta Section Treasurer, and I helped out for a year or so on IEEE MOVE fundraising. And then about 1 million years ago, I was actually the treasurer of my local chapter of Eta Kappa Nu, as well as my fraternity in college. So talk a little bit about fundamentals, bank accounts. Most units utilize the IEEE concentration banking. It acts as a checking account that has a debit card, a CB card, and then we also have long-term investment accounts that are tied to that concentration banking account. Units do have the ability to use a local bank checking account if they desire to. I don't know too many that do. There's a number of advantages to using the CB, the concentration banking account that we'll actually talk about a little bit. I just want to let people know that they do have the option, if they really wanted to, use their own local bank checking account and to do the reporting, the required reporting, utilizing that account. Bookkeeping systems, we'll talk a little bit about that in a minute. And then budget. just looking at some of the sources of income. Obviously, we get an annual rebate and bonus based upon our membership and a number of different factors, how many meetings. It works the same way for both at the region level as well as it's each individual section level. It's the opportunity for additional income from both conferences and seminars, as well as meetings that you might have during the year, professional development type meetings, women in engineering, and so forth. And then there could be special project support that we can get from IEEE USA, as well as the foundation, and some from the region. And I know Region 3 has, with our concentration, not our concentration, but our heavily involvement with the MOVE group, because they are based really in, for the most part, the leadership is based for the most part in Region 3. We have been a beneficiary from some grants and foundation money from IEEE. And then expenditures basically are defined by the budget that the section or the region puts together, and all those expenditures can be let with, obviously if they're part of the budget, along with the approval from the chair and the XCOM. And then there are requirements annually to do both financial reporting. We have to report basically the year-end results of our books from basically an income and P&L balance sheet reporting, and then as well as compliance reporting. We have to make sure that all the officers are executing the proper conflict of interest statements and that type of thing. And then there's a certain amount of preparation that goes into getting the information that IEEE requires for the annual audit. The regions, all the regions are audited each year. Sections are audited usually at random. All right, so talking about the bookkeeping systems, there may be some units that use NetSuite exclusively to basically put each income or each expenditure in the NetSuite system. That we'll talk a little bit more about in detail later. Some sections, when I was the Atlanta treasurer, we used a very nice spreadsheet that's been around for, I think it goes back to about 2008 or something like that. And it's been tried and true, and it worked very well. Other units use something like Quicken. That's what Region 3 does. We use Quicken for to manage our finances and keep the books. There are other things like Mint. Mint has a tool as well. So talk a little bit about guidance. Kind of going from the high level down to the lower level in terms of precedents. We have to live by the various different rules in the IEEE Constitution and bylaws at the very top level, IEEE policies. There is an IEEE Financial Operations Manual, a chart of accounts. I'll show you that in a little bit. We have the MGA Operations Manual, and then down into the region level, we have a Region 3 Operations Manual. Section 3 of that manual deals with finance. I know Dave has been working hard. Dave Green has been working hard to get that updated, and we're in the process of doing that now in all different sections. And then there could be section bylaws if they exist, but they have to be consistent with the higher level IEEE operations as well. So we can't really just go off and do our own thing. We can have our own separate bylaws, but they do have to fit within the confines and requirements of the overall IEEE. All right, resources. Let's see, I'm going to try to pull a couple of these web pages up if I can. So there is an IEEE Center for Leadership Excellence, and specifically in my case that I'm most interested in, there's you put down what role you're in, whether a section treasurer or a region treasurer. and they have various different training materials. Let me see if I'm lucky. I'll try to pull up. Bill, is that pulled up, that web page?
We had it briefly, but now we've got a gray screen.
Okay. Let me see. Let me try to share my screen.
Yes, now we have it, SLE, the CLE.
Okay. All right. Sorry about that. So here's just an example of the main page in the Center for Leadership Excellence. This happens to, I pulled up the role of section treasurer, and then, you know, there's various different information, various different courses to take. These are all very good for whatever role a person might fit, you know, in their region or their section. You see, there's courses even on NetSuite, Code of Ethics, that type of thing. All right. Let me go back to then okay, go back. Go ahead and get this. So on NetSuite, there's certain training resources, and when you get set up with NetSuite, by emailing finance-solutions@IEEE.org, they can give you both a login for NetSuite as well as point you to resources for the actual operations of NetSuite. And then try to show you one other one here. Oh, sorry, I must have muted myself. Can you see that page? IEEE member, geographic activities, financial reporting. Okay. So here's just another web page that I showed you the web link for that. But you can see there's various different forums, instructions on logging into NetSuite, how to write checks, how to record transfers in NetSuite, generate a balance sheet, that type of thing. Use of NetSuite, and then compliance reporting that I talked a little bit about. What we need to do each year as not just the treasurer, but you know, the leadership of geographic units. Middle instructions for the reports and that type of thing. And we'll talk a little bit more about NetSuite in the second half of the presentation. All right, so, you know, looking at a little bit of advice that, you know, I picked up from when I was at the section level, as well as working with Ken as I took over. You know, we think of engineers as generally honest people. We try to avoid any perception of impropriety. The bottom line is to be very organized, keep well-organized files, records, and that type of thing. Our advice is always really to utilize the IEEE concentration banking system. It just fits in much better with, you know, with being able to report back to IEEE, and in a little bit I'll show you how it's easier when you have to do your financial reporting than if you had to generate your own templates, for example, to be able to do the financial reporting at the end of the year. And then using NetSuite, we have to use NetSuite for the reporting, but there's various different ways to do it. Some people do it on a daily, or every time they make a transaction, either write a check or something, they put it in either on a daily or a monthly basis. You can use a monthly and at the end of the year, an annual bank upload template that if you're using the IEEE concentration banking system, it's very easy to do, because at the end of each monthly bank statement, there's a link that you can click to generate a template, and it'll automatically generate that template with the account information, and you just have to fill in what chart of accounts, what general ledger account that transaction is placed against, and then you can basically send that on to finance-solutions at IEEE, and they will take that template and basically that's your financial record or transaction for the month. And then of course at the end of the year you have to do it on an annual basis. It's good to have the section chair have at least read-only access to NetSuite, so that they can go in and they can look at various different transactions. They don't necessarily need to know how to actually put the transactions in, but it's good for them to be able to look at it and read it, and read only. Keep a copy of everything, maintain good records, keep all receipts, and just be ready for an audit. By being organized, you will be ready for an audit. Let's say, talk a little bit about budgets. So it's a plan, and it's a very important part of every geographic unit to have a well-defined, well-thought-out budget. If things change in the middle of the year, and that often does happen, you can vote on it to be revised, if needed. We like to start in the late fall. Actually, I think we started last October working on the 2020 budget. We went through several different iterations. The XCOM was involved. Some people, it's best to try to do what we call a zero-based budget, to have everybody take a look at their various different accounts and activities, and budget from the bottom up. And that typically takes a lot of time, a lot of effort. Sometimes we just end up taking a look at what last year's budget is and try to compare what are we doing differently in the coming year. Are we doing less? Are we doing more? If so, then what additional amounts or maybe what lesser amounts do we need in a particular area? A lot of the activity in the geographic units is somewhat similar to year. I know in certain cases we try to increase our activity level, so that therefore you need to reflect that in your budget planning. But so we iterate the budget, and then we basically through December and vote on it, and then report the very first meeting of the new year, the very first XCOM meeting. That's what we did this year. So there is an IEEE MGA chart of accounts that we have to follow to some degree. Well, we have to follow that chart of accounts, but that chart of accounts only has really at the current time, it only has 2 levels of detail, of subcategories. And we really need more than that to really get more visibility into what we're doing, where we're getting our money from, and where our expenditures are going. So I'll talk about that, and I'll show you some examples. But we do, even our Region 3 chart of account, which is more detailed than the MGA chart of account, does follow the general numbers. So there's various different numbers, general ledger numbers for income, certain income categories, and same thing for various different expense categories. So we follow that, but we do have additional details in our chart of accounts. And at the section level, there's a requirement to actually, the chapters, society chapters should be funded. And you really need to track your budget month to month to make sure you're staying on budget, or if there's any issues that are arising because you might be getting over budget, that should be tracked monthly. And at each one of the sections, XCOM meetings on a monthly basis, the treasurer should report on the status of the budget. Just a note on operating reserve, the 3.2 and the administration of MGA finances calls for reserves. These dogs not. Per the IEEE Financial Operations Manual, we should have reserves of about 50% of what our annual expenses, exclusive of those dedicated to Sections Congress. So you take every 3 years we have Sections Congress, you kind of exclude that amount, and we should have a reserve figure of about 50% of what you annually expend in your section or your geographic unit. In our Region 3 Operations Manual, says we should have 35 to 50% of the average expenses over the last 4 years. So on the income side, we mentioned this already, annual rebate is based upon the meetings reported by sections and chapters, number of members, number of active chapters. If a unit meets the early reporting deadline, which is usually a week to 10 days before the final drop dead date deadline for reporting, they get an extra 10% bonus. It's always important. We try to strive for all the units to get that. There's conference sponsorship with risk and reward. I think Charles is on the line, and I know he's working really hard to pull in SoutheastCon 2020, and has been doing a great job on that. But you can see that not all conferences work out, and it was obviously beyond the region's control with SoutheastCon 2020. But I think it's going to work out fine, since we had to cancel out based upon the governor's order. But, and then we had the other local events we talked about, YP, Women in Engineering, Life Member events, and that type of thing. One thing I might mention that was a little confusing when I became treasurer in the Atlanta section, the deposits for these CB accounts, we have numbers on our checks, on our CB accounts, but if you go to the bank, the Wells Fargo bank, and try to use that account, it doesn't actually get into the right account until IEEE straightens it out. So we are provided with deposit slips that have the correct account number for when we make deposits in that for the CB account. That's the other advantage. One other advantage of using the CB, the concentration banking account, is that they take care of printing the checks, getting all the materials and deposit slips, and sent to the treasurer and the director of each of the units. Expenses, some examples of expenses. Obviously, the main thing are various different meetings and events that the unit might have during the year. And then travel. We have a Region 3, there's an overall IEEE travel policy, and then there's a Region 3 travel policy which adheres to the overall travel policy. We are now using, for region level expenses, we are now using Concur for expense reimbursement versus the old Excel spreadsheet. At some point, I don't know exactly where we are on that with the different sections. I know that their plan is to roll that out down into the section levels for using Concur. I mentioned the concentration banking, obviously is a checking account, but also debit cards are available. Usually the unit director and the unit treasurer get one of the debit cards that they can use. There is a monthly limit on the use, but if we have a big event, you can request that limit, which is usually like $1,000, can be raised, and it can be raised significantly if you need it for a big conference like SoutheastCon, for example. So that's always possible to do. As I mentioned, it's important to get good receipts and document those receipts. And I don't know why I said typically, but the treasurer and the section chair, we need two people, at least two people on the bank account for signature purposes. One thing treasurer everybody should know is that you should never write a check to yourself, even though it might be a valid expense reimbursement. You always have somebody else sign the check. Section chair, for example, would sign the check for an expense that's written to the treasurer. Account reconciliation, I'd recommend that you do it. You keep up with it on a monthly basis. Don't let it go, because then it just gets harder to do as the months pile up. As soon as the bank statement comes out, you'll get an email from IEEE saying that the concentration bank, your concentration bank account has been finalized for that month, and then you can go in. You don't really want to reconcile it earlier than before getting that email from IEEE, because sometimes a few things will change. They'll actually, the interest might change that they attribute to the account, or there is a very late or a corrected transaction that IEEE might make. For example, if you're transferring from one unit to another, it could either be a correctional or an addition that might not be on there, even if it's at the end. After it could be, we usually don't get the email from IEEE until about the middle of the month, actually, around maybe the 12th or 13th of the month. So if you try to reconcile before that, you do run the risk of having some changes that are made when they actually finalize the statement. Always run a reconciliation report and keep copies. Financial status and reporting. So I kind of mentioned this already. Once you reconcile your statements and your accounts, you should publish your reports as soon as you do the reconciliation. You want to basically always have an updated budget showing where you are on both the income and expense side. We have an itemized transaction statement, which will show every transaction that was made during that monthly period. The banking summary is interesting. We actually show a banking summary that goes back 4 or 5 years. And what that does is it shows you historically how much was spent, for example, on travel for SoutheastCon over the last 4 or 5 years. And it's very helpful to make sure that we're still in line, from a budgetary point. And it also helps when you're actually doing the budget to see, what the trend has been over that period of time. And then you can run a P&L, profit and loss statement, as well as a balance sheet. I already mentioned that each XCOM meeting, the treasurer report, whether at the section or the region level, that should be on each XCOM agenda. End of year reporting, the same reports that we do monthly, but obviously for the full annual year. The section includes chapters and affinity groups, life members, that type of thing, but not student branches. There used to be an L50 form. I actually haven't, I don't think I've ever run into that. I think they got rid of that before I was treasurer. And I'll talk a little bit more about that in our second talk on NetSuite. There's a 10% early reporting bonus deadline. So this past year was February 21st for the 2019 year for the report. And I mentioned that usually it's about a week earlier than what they call the drop dead date for section rebate. So you run the risk of not getting your rebate and properly, or at least on time, if you don't get your reports in at least by the drop dead date. So this past year was February 29th. I mentioned compliance reporting. There's actually a very easily used MGA compliance portal now that we are using that made the submission of the various different documents. The treasurer also has some additional reports to get in. There's a 1099 report for when we award or grant somebody either with an award, like at SoutheastCon, we usually give out some awards for best paper or things like that. Even if it's usually, I think for 1099s, it's over $500 or $600, but whether it doesn't matter for IEEE purposes, we have to report a 1099 for any amount granted. That's not including, you don't have to do a 1099 for paying expenditures and travel and that type of thing. It's only if we're actually granting an award to somebody that's in a dollar amount. And then I mentioned these other things like conflict of interest, officer contact form. We need to know that who the new officers are and all their contact information. And then there's the add and delete signer forms for the treasurer and the section or region director, whoever's going to have access to the bank accounts. We have to add their names to the bank account for signing purposes. And people that are rolling off in those positions, we have to send in a delete signer form. Eric, did you just flash a question, or is that to Bill? I didn't see it. I didn't read it. I'll go on. Okay, so on the audit.
No, that was to you, John. So he used the chat to everyone. Right,
okay.
You. So he said, John, don't forget to mention the availability of credit card against concentration account that simplifies payment of expenses and reduces the needs for receipts.
Thank you, Eric. You did that. No, very good. Good point. Yeah, because each one of the credit card transactions that's made on the CB account, comes in on your and recorded on your concentration bank account. You still should, if you use it and you're at a dinner or some type of thing like that, or you're using it for postage or whatever, you still want to go ahead and at least maintain that and keep that receipt. So on the audit side, so after all the financial reporting is submitted, as I mentioned, the audit is required for regions. Sections are audited on a random, probably more on a rotating basis. It is required if you have a section, for example, that has revenue expenses that are greater than $250,000 per year. It's required for those sections. And then there's some help in the self-audit guide and checklist. We went through the audit. It was very easy, actually. We provided the information that was, they did some spot checking, for example, on our region books. Some of the larger expenditures, we basically showed them all the backup information on that. They looked at what we had sent in on our NetSuite reporting, and they had a few questions. We were able to explain everything to their satisfaction, and we received a satisfactory. I think there's 3 levels: satisfactory, I can't remember now, unfortunately, but there's 3 levels, satisfactory being the highest. And the region received that with no adverse findings or any questionable findings at all. And a point down here in red that I think treasurers, should want to get an audit, and as a CYA, assuming the audit's going to come out in a favorable process result. All right, just quickly, I want to talk a little bit about phishing. This has been going on for a number of years, and actually, when I was the section treasurer in Atlanta, I received a number of emails, and I'm sure a number of you folks have probably received some of these phishing emails as well. And I've got a couple examples, but these are real-looking emails, supposedly from the right people, to and from the right people, requesting to make some type of a financial transaction, transfer money. So the bottom line is you need to look at these things carefully. I know IEEE has been sending out occasionally reminder emails that be on the lookout, be aware that targeted phishing emails are being sent. Somehow they get a hold of various different ways. They get a hold of emails and names of officers and leaders in various different geographic units, and they start to use that to try to fraudulently get somebody to make a transfer. And the bottom line is, if you have any questions, call the person. Usually you're going to know the person who's supposedly sent you the email. So if it looks a little strange, you certainly should call them. And here's an example. This is actually one I received back in 2018. I'll let you just read it. Sally Joe I changed our director's name at that point. I didn't think it was necessary to actually have her name in there, but it was from our it was actually from our section director, and this is an exact email that I received. So you can see that I think people are getting smarter now. I know that I think that we had a couple of issues where there were some losses, and I think people are getting a little bit more alert and a little bit smarter about these things. But I just wanted to kind of show you that that stuff is still out there. Here's another one. I think that's it on my first one. Do we want to, Bill? I mean, if you want to open it up for questions, or we can see if there's any out there. Or
there are no questions being raised through the chat or the Q&A. What I'm going to do is I'm going to do a Mark Torres and unmute everyone and see if there are any questions that pop up.
Yeah, John, Damit from Area 9.
Hi, Jimmy. How are you?
Can I put my question?
Yeah.
I have two questions. Quick question. Concur. How many regions use Concur so far? All the regions use, or only few?
How many regions use what? I believe Dave Green might correct me, but I believe all regions are supposed to be using it at this point in time.
All right. Question number 2. I assume all the regions. Question number 2 is a proposal. Now we're using Concur already. Can we still organize a training to use Concur? Because in my case, for the last 2-3 months, even before I went to SoutheastCon, I spent most of my time learning how to use Concur. And I had to make the same claim 3-4 times. John, you and me know. And I still make it. Because most of the time that I should spend for my volunteer time in Jamaica, I spend in how to rectify the Concur issues. I don't know how many is in my boat. I still propose, like last time, we need to put a Concur training.
Hmm. Yeah. I know we had a couple of issues. I partly to do with the transaction fees because of you and Charlene were in Jamaican dollars. I was on the phone with the IEEE Treasury folks, Robert Morrisman, as well as Mary Ellen Randall, the MGA treasurer. They know that there's some issues out there. They told me that, and they are working. They're still working on resolving some of those. As far as training, I don't know if there's much on the IEEE site. I could quickly pull up. Let me see if I can pull up that. Just bear with me. I'm going to try to pull up the training site, or the Concur site.
So while John's bringing that up, I went ahead and muted everyone back. You guys saw that several of you muted yourselves. I muted everyone back up so we could hear John. If you would just raise your virtual hand or post a chat or something like that, then I can recognize you.
Okay. So I think, is this pulled up now? This is the IEEE expense reimbursement site. And let me scroll down. Bill, are you seeing this?
Yes, we are.
Okay. So you can see new volunteer expense reimbursement platform. Denise, I don't know if you tried to use this training here, but they're showing various different video tutorials. And then this expense report purpose library. And there's FAQs here. So there is some training out there. I mean, as the region treasurer, I took a couple of different webinars based training, but there's some out here. Did you try to look at these at all to see if they're worthwhile? I mean, I'll admit that I have not looked at these specific references here, but I guess my question to you is, have you tried to dig into some of these things to see if they would help?
You're unmuted.
Problem because I claim using US dollars. Because of the situation was not clear, I claim it in US dollars. There was no Jamaican dollar question. Number two, I did myself before March 1st. I did training twice on the video provided. That is why I raised the question of this these conversion ratios and the fees being charged by the Western Union and the bank by the incoming $15. I raised that question very early, but the answer I got is we have used this Concur in other foreign regions, and hence go ahead. That was the answer I got from you, I think.
So may I suggest that you take this offline with John? Because I know he has another presentation he wants to give tonight. Since it sounds like an individual user help request, and John can help you or provide any help that he can provide. And then what we can do is he can proceed with his second part, especially since it's a 8:45 now, Eastern time. Would that be all right, John, or did you have something you wanted to respond?
No. Just very quickly, I'll tell Demeet that yes, I mean the transaction fee issue, the $15 transaction fee, the answer I got from IEEE Treasury is that is not supposed to happen. They understand that's an issue, so they're still. I guess the bottom line is they're still trying to work out some of the kinks, and I know it's not the best thing to do, but as we instructed you and as you did. We don't want people to be shorted on anything. So if that happens, and it really has only happened actually with you and Charlene, I haven't, and then all the other ones so far we have not had any issues, any other transactions, transaction fees taken out. So I'm not sure exactly what happened there, but they said that shouldn't have happened. They're working it, and we'll just keep an eye on it to see if it crops up with anybody else. But yes, to me, you and I can talk offline some more on this, and I continue to talk to the Treasury people about issues that we might be having with it. So I certainly will make sure I make that they're aware of it. So, all right, let me go back to yep. Go ahead.
I just said thank you for answering the question. Sounds like you got us back to the extent that you can.
Gotcha. Okay. There we go. Okay. That's showing up? Bill?
Yes.
Okay. So just a little background on why we have to do some of the things we do from a financial aspect. Just keep in mind that IEEE is a 501c3 entity. We have to file a USA tax return. We're a large company, so they do an external audit each year from outside IEEE. Keeping in mind that everything all the way down to society and chapter dollars, all the way through sections up to the regions, that's still off IEEE money, even though it's doled out to the various different sections and chapters and regions. It's still IEEE funds. Therefore, we have to report annually and audit where necessary or where either required, like I say, on the regions or sometimes on the sections. And that's the reason we're going through these. That's the reason we utilize the financial controls that we have. So again, I didn't really have a lot to do with this L50 report, but it was due each January for the year. The problem that I'm told we had, that it was a large multi-page spreadsheet, very time-consuming, awful, I guess is the word that I've been told. IEEE auditors were not happy with the whole process. They really didn't get good visibility, I think, about funds, especially at the more local levels, until the end of the year. They were hoping that they would have, since it was basically a once a year thing, they wanted to have more visibility in the year, so they wanted a different tool. And so that's why they chose NetSuite. And it's not a complete solution because, some people would use NetSuite on a daily basis every time they make a transaction, and then monthly they would go upload the template. And I think that would keep the auditors happy to see, at least on a monthly basis. But I don't think there was actually a requirement to do that on a monthly basis. I think some units waited until the end of the year anyway and did their whole annual NetSuite template upload. So they were still in the same situation that they had with the L50, that the auditors and the Treasury people at IEEE didn't really see what was going on at those other levels, if those levels were using or doing the NetSuite reporting on an annual basis. Benefits, it is it's an enterprise-wide cloud-based system. It does handle multiple currencies. It does do the roll-up capability. So when you have a chapter a section that rolls up through the region, that rolls up through IEEE, there is that visibility in terms of the financial roll-up. So the annual reporting that is done just by doing either the transactions within NetSuite or when you do the annual NetSuite template upload. Challenges, It's designed for worldwide enterprises. Interface is a little bit complex. It's licensing, it's not cheap. Here's my point about the MGA chart of accounts that they use within NetSuite, and it really goes down only to 2 levels. And as I mentioned, our Region 3, and I think a lot of other units have at least 3 levels for better account resolution on the chart of accounts. I'm just going to show you an example. This is the actual MGA chart of accounts. So this is on the expense, I don't have the whole thing. This is just a sample of it. So on the expense side, they have 4.1s. So 4 is a major category for expenses, for, program expenses. 5 is more of a category for expenses that are G&A type, the general administrative management type expenses. But you can see that there's really only 2 levels here. There's 4 is the top level, and then 4.1, 4.2. So we really want to have something that has more definition and visibility, and that's why we go to higher levels. And like I say, we have 3 levels. I'm going to see if I can pull up. I wanted to show you. Let me show you an example of our chart of accounts to give you an idea. Let's see. Okay, I think you should be able to see that. So this is the category list, or essentially the chart of accounts that we use on Region 3. And so if I go down, there's various different levels of income. 1 major categories, or category 1 is contributions. We don't really use it that much. Program revenues, number 2. Other receipts, number 3, including our rebate here, headquarters, the assessment that we get from dues and that type of thing. Let's see. And then here I'll show you, since I showed you the expense side of the MGA chart of accounts, here's the similar. So here we had 4 program expenses, but we break it down into a number of different categories. So 4.1 or 4.10 really is meetings, 4.20 publications. And then we have conference expenses like 4.50. We can break that down into another one. We can break that further down into conference committee, technical conferences, SoutheastCon, recurring SoutheastCon equipment, that type of thing. Educational, professional activities, our PACE activities are in there, but again, we're all broken down. Show, for example, even down at I mentioned some of the special projects that we have. And here's the MOVE project that we help fund, broken down separately. And then farther down is the management and general expenses. So we have travel expenses, big one here for SoutheastCon, for Region 3 planning, director-elect, that type of thing. So the main thing to get out of this is that right now with NetSuite, which is a negative, is that they're utilizing the MGA chart of accounts, which has lower visibility in terms of the various different activities that a unit might want to participate in. Go back to the other. Okay, Bill, is this up showing the options for using NetSuite?
Yes.
Okay, so I mentioned how some units will use NetSuite. Contemporaneous really means that they do it on a transaction, either on a daily or however often they have a transaction, whether it's an income or it's an expense. They do it, they keep it up to date. It takes, if you have a lot of transactions, you can keep a treasurer fairly busy doing it that way. You can do an upload, as I mentioned, using a template. And if you use a non-concentration banking account from a local bank, for example, then you have to put together your own template it's really not too hard to do. It's mainly the amount and the transaction, who's on the transaction, the amount of the transaction, and then you have to fill in, the various different category, what we call the general ledger category. It's a lot easier doing it from a concentration banking account, because at the end of each statement that you have on your account, there's a link that you just click on the link and it generates the template for you. You save it, and then you put in, it doesn't obviously list the general ledger number in the transactions. You have to fill that in, but all the transactions were there with the proper amounts and the dates and that type of thing. So it's fairly simple for the treasurer to put in the general ledger account and then email that to the finance solutions at IEEE, and that handles your monthly report. So here, contemporaneous data entry, the enter transactions as they happen, you reconcile your account with NetSuite. The reports are generated from NetSuite, so you don't have to have something like Quicken, and then you upload the documentation. But again, the limited budget category resolution, which I do feel is a big negative. I think you need to, for proper planning and proper operation of a unit, I think you need to be able to really drill down into higher levels of detail of your expenses and where your income is coming from. The monthly upload, I've already kind of talked about this really. And then from a NetSuite, from a CB account rather, very easy to do. Just log into your concentration banking, click on the link to download the compliance spreadsheet, fill it out, and send it in. Pretty much went over that.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Oh, you just went silent. I was just making sure you were still there.
All right. No, I think that's it. But I thought I had another slide. I guess not. I know that IEEE right now is looking at an enterprise-wide, like an enterprise resource planning type tool that they want to try to standardize on the chart of accounts. In fact, right now they're using Region 3's chart of accounts. We submitted those for consideration, and I think they felt that the region pretty much had defined adequately, the various different categories that they need for both on the income side as well as expense side. So we submitted our chart of accounts, and they're using that now to evaluate whether or not we can standardize to some degree all across the units, so that we all use the same chart of accounts with a tool that then each unit would report using this tool, and that would give, and it would be real time, because I mean you'd actually do the transactions as they occur in the system, and then all that information rolls up into this single enterprise-wide system, so that the Treasury folks at IEEE then have basically a real-time picture of what's going on. So bottom line, Dave might have some more input on that, but bottom line is I think NetSuite probably was being looked at as to be replaced by some other system, maybe in the next year or so. But until then, we still need to use NetSuite as our financial reporting tool, at least on an annual basis. So that's what I had. Any questions? I got, welcome to spend some time with answering any questions I might answer.
All right. So Bruce Harvey has a question. Let me unmute him. Okay, go ahead, Bruce.
Oh, okay. You can hear me now?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. I just had a quick question on the editing of those templates. How does most people edit those?
How do they edit them? Yeah,
What-
it's kind of weird, isn't it? Yeah, so you download it off of the Concentration banking account. You have to save it properly, because sometimes I've had issues with that too. But you can save it as like an Excel. You save it into an Excel format, some Excel format, because it comes down like almost as a web, as a web link. But you need to take that and save it into not a PDF, but save it into an Excel format, and then you're able to edit it in really any Excel application.
Oh, so it actually is an Excel, because it downloaded without any extension on it. The only thing I was able to open up when it was in Word so far, but I was trying to figure out what it was supposed to open in.
Right. No, you need to go ahead and save it. Yeah, that's right. You just need to, when it first downloads from Concentration Banking, save it into some form of Excel as an Excel document.
Okay. I got it.
Yep, that's thrown me a few times too.
Are there any other questions? I'm not seeing any virtual hands raised. I think based upon the experience last time, I won't unmute everyone. Relate, helpful.
Well, if anybody has any questions that pop up, feel free to email me. I've left my email there on the screen, jebalsam@IEEE.org, and I'd be happy to talk to you. But I appreciate the time, and
All right, I want to thank everyone for your time, and I know that Director Gostin does as well. She really wants to do everything that the region can do to empower the sections with their operations. I want to especially thank John for the presentation tonight, and stay safe. And sometime tomorrow, our next event actually is going to be next Wednesday. We're going to talk about two different kinds of events. It's also a makeup from a Region 3 presentation, from a SoutheastCon presentation, a pair of them that had been intended. So stand by for that email tomorrow. And thank you everyone for your time. Good night.
thank you. Bye-bye.